What's up, everyone? I thought I would try a different way of recording my videos. This is a response to Phoneybeetlemaniac, a name that is the bane of my existence. His video is questioning my opinions on the presuppositional argument. Before we begin, I think it is important that I define what I believe the presuppositional argument to be. I will discuss why I feel it is an invalid argument with atheists within the actual response of his video and at the end. The definition of presupposition is a thing tacitly assumed beforehand at the beginning of a line of argument or course of action. I would agree with this and would define the presuppositional argument in as the belief that the Protestant Bible is accurate and correct and does not need to be questioned nor examined. This belief then infers that the Christian faith is without fallibility, assuming it accurately follows the Bible. Simply put, the presuppositional argument is a statement, not a debating point. It allows no room to be wrong and does not allow for discourse. It is the same thing as saying, I take the stand that Star Trek: The Next Generation is the best series that existed in Star Trek itself. Because we know that TNG is the best series in Star Trek, Captain Picard is the greatest captain. Any attempts to say that Picard is not would have to be refuted, and utilizing any other series, such as the old series, Voyager, or DS9 is not valid, because we know that TNG is the best series, and thus not able to be compared to any of the others. Let's get started.
I would say that you reiterate to some extent the presuppositional argument has nothing to do with the Protestant Bible. The Protestant Bible wasn't even around. Was it 12th century? Yeah, 1100. So again, so it wouldn't have existed. The Protestant Bible wouldn't have, maybe the beginnings of one would have, but again, it wasn't something that was in St. Anselm's box because he was a Catholic. And it's to do with that the Christian worldview best represents reality. That's what the presuppositional argument is saying. That what we see best represented by the Christian worldview. That is the presuppositional argument. Now, as I said, there are multiple sorts of the presuppositional arguments, so which one are you talking about? But we'll get into that proper as you respond to my video. To your Star Trek analogy, you can use evidence, like for example, why is Picard better? He had more series to progress, he had more humorless, he wasn't just fighting everybody, there was times that he had to think his way out of it, he wasn't just battling all the time, he had more, character development with, the Borg taking over his body and him having to deal with the multiple murders he perpetrated as Locutus, the multiple times he would refer to the time that the probe got into him and he'd keep the flu as time of his memory in that particular environment. I thought that was well done, and that's the reason why I think Picard is better, because he had more character development than Kirk. Though Kirk, I would say, he probably had if I was to compare the show, I think the first series is tighter than a lot of the Next Generation series. So, but the second series I'm not too sure about though, of the original series. So let's continue with that.
Started with the
I'll be
video.
back here in a week once again. This is going out to Losoyo. He made a couple of days ago, well, about a couple of weeks ago, a video about presuppositionalism. Now, me, Michael, and Losoyo have, all three of us, discussed this at length.
Truth be told, Gary, I actually don't ever remember having a discussion that was in-depth regarding the presuppositionalist argument. That's not to say that it didn't happen, I just don't remember us ever having a conversation. So I apologize if we've had this discussion before, and I have simply forgotten.
It was about half an hour, about an hour, when you and Michael were doing some sort of thing with SimCity. Again, it's not that important, because again, it's obviously that this subject needs going over by people who actually understand it. So let's continue, because I don't think it's really that important. in which I've made my position very clear that there's a difference between what Satan Brunegate is and actual presuppositionalism. There's a galaxy of difference.
So this seems to me to be the no true Scotsman's fallacy. I would truly like to know what the difference is between a presuppositionalist and what Satan does. Both a presuppositionalist and Satan assume that the Bible, they presuppose that it is absolutely accurate and correct. Now, the way that a presuppositionalist such as yourself and a way that Satan decides to argue that point may be different, but you both presuppose that the Bible is accurate. So how is he any different from yourself beyond the fact that he is insincere and you are sincere?
Again, I don't presuppose that the Bible is true. The Bible is a myriad of different types of writing, and again, that isn't what Satan is doing either. He's trying to what he does is dishonest. He'll try and get you into a cul-de-sac where you either are forking road where you have to either argue one point and do it dishonestly, or argue honestly and go down the cul-de-sac he wants you to go down. That's what he does. Presuppositionalism isn't that, and that's my point. And I'll explain it further. Yes, I am a presuppositionalist, but I'm not in the way of the Bible, but I am in, let's say, for example, the way the universe works. I assume it works a certain way, that the facts we find out about it will not change, or will not change enough to reflect, to differ from what I currently believe is pointing towards a deity existing. So I use those presuppositions that what we are to, that science won't just come along and say whatever the illusion doesn't work in the way that we currently think, that the universe isn't the way that we currently think, that you know, things like, for example, pointing dimensions and M theory and like M theory is more practical than, let's say, the multiverse theory, or the multiverse theory and M theory really can't exist together and stuff like that. You know, I assume that they can exist together, and that arguing for one is not really an argument against the other. That is presuppositionalism. Is that you assume that the evidence is going in one way, because you can't know these things for 100%. So you have to presuppose that evidence is going to read us in that civilization to come to a logical conclusion. It has nothing to do with the interpretation of literature. That is a different thing. Which is why, whenever I say presuppositionalism, this, I just ignore it, because frankly they don't know what presuppositionalism is. Even if you think presuppositionalism is the worst argument for anything ever,
I do.
If you don't understand it, then you can't really say that. Sorry, it's like me going, well, I think the Nietzschean argument against God is poor, and I hadn't heard it. I have heard the Nietzschean argument for God. Again, just because somebody recites something doesn't mean that is the actual representation of it.
The definition of recite is repeat aloud or declaim from memory before an audience. If a person is reciting something, then they are accurately portraying it. I can recite to you the 5 pillars of Islam. Whether I understand what I am reciting or not would be debatable, but I can accurately state them. Now, if you meant recite to mean misrepresent, then that is possible. But again, I want to know how Satan is misrepresenting presuppositional apologetics. He is presupposing the authority of the Bible, and he is presupposing that God is knowledge. How is this not presuppositional apologetics?
I never said he wasn't. I'm saying what he does is dishonest. And it isn't presuppositional apologetics, because it isn't. It is it's what I like to call the fork in the road that all discussions should avoid. You know, any discussion that leads you to have to pick from two modes of transport is increasingly dishonest. And that's what Satan Brunegate does, as I said before. And what else he does is that doesn't understand the idea of conversation and the idea of dialogue. And this is not presupposition apologetics. A presuppositional apologetics is all about the conversation. How can we presuppose this? Can we presuppose that? Can we presuppose the other based upon that? Now, he's a hard presuppositionalist, and I would not deny that. I have never denied that. I just say he misrepresents it in the way he goes about it, because his hard presuppositionalism is mixed in with, as I said before, and you'll get to further on, with a bit of determinism. And I think that is where he's going wrong, because again, presuppositionalism is all about what we can understand, how we can understand it, and things like that. It's all about our own self-consciousness, our self-worth, our self-examination, is the examination we give to other things. Our logical processes and reasonable processes of dealing with information. That is what the presuppositional argument is all about. That isn't what Seitan Brunnergate does. Seitan Brunnergate is about the opposite of that. He's all about trying to lead people down a certain road. You look about any debate he's done, you'll see that he gets people to say, is it true that you can't know everything? Can you know everything? And it's all this repetitive crap. And that is the antithesis of what presuppositional apologetics are about. They're about what we can know, how we can know it. Is there a way that we can know these things? That is presuppositional apologetics in a nutshell. It's about what we can know and how we can know these things from experience, from knowledge, from our own self-worth, whatever. From our own humanity, what knowledge and skill, what knowledge and reason and logic lead us towards. Not necessarily, you have to leave people there by doing word tricks on them. That is not presuppositionalism, and that's where Seitan Brunnergate goes wrong. And with presuppositionalism, what do you mean? Because there's many iterations of it. There's hard presuppositionalism, there's soft presuppositionalism, there's even evidentiary presuppositionalism. So what are you talking about? You're talking about presuppositionalism as a whole. Everybody uses presuppositional argumentation in their outlook. And I'll give you an example here, Losoyo. Let's say, for example, an atheist discussion with a theist, and the theist will say, well, I have no reason to believe in your deity because it follows what I know about X, Y, and Z. That's presuppositionalism. They're taking what they know about the real world and presupposing it onto the unknown. They say that God has the same sort of patterns of things that we used to not know. Therefore, it's presupposing that the rest of what we consider reality is going to follow that particular pattern. That is what's called evidentiary presuppositionalism. And it is something that is used by both atheists and Christians. As Christians would tend to use the universe and say it looks from very well that it's been designed and blah, yada, yada, yada. That is evidentiary presuppositionalism. Okay? Soft presuppositionalism is taking the worldview that the atheists are wrong, but are not inherently irrational when they come to their. But, like, for example, people can interpret things in different ways and come to things from different perspectives. Come from different backgrounds, different educational levels, things like that, and read things very differently. That is what's called soft presuppositionalism. It's where you take your biases and apply them to whatever. But again, it is presuppositionalism nonetheless. Hard presuppositionalism is saying that Christianity is the only way to have a rational worldview of the world. Now, some atheists use this as well, because what they do, they'll say, well, you're delusional, or you're irrational, or you're unreasonable if you're Christian, because you're reasonable in every other way apart from the way that you look at the world. That is an argument that many Christians will be familiar with. That is a presupposition. That's a presupposition that you're rational in every other thing in your life, just apart from that one thing, and that you're irrational about that. That's a presupposition. The presupposition that you're wrong and they're right.
I do not have an issue with the definitions and the examples that you have provided with me. This does not mean that they are in any way good examples of how to debate or even how to begin to persuade someone to become a Christian, or for that matter, an atheist.
Well, I disagree. I think it's a good way to debate, because we are, as a community, sharing our presupposition, because we're all making educated guesses, or even just half-hearted guesses on what the reality of metaphysical entities like God are. We're all making guesses because we can't 100% know. That's our presuppositions, that we're making educated guesses based upon what we see, what we know, what we relate. That is what that is. Again, you say yourself that there's a difference between knowledge and talking. I don't disagree with that. What I disagree with is that isn't a presupposition. It is. You call it an opinion. It's a presupposition or opinion. You don't know. You're just making an educated opinion based upon what you do know, and using that to back up what you think is true. What he does is a bit of hard presuppositions and tied in with a little bit of the new atheist ideals, should we say, in that, if you cajole somebody into believing, then they're going to believe something.
Glad you admit that he is a presuppositionalist.
Yeah, I've never denied that fact. I said he doesn't understand the argument. There's a difference between claiming to be something, which again is a personal claim, which I can't say you're not, because that's an old true Scotsman, and say you don't understand something. Like, for example, I can claim to be a Catholic, but if I don't understand the idea of Mass, I understand the idea of blood atonement, I'm not really Catholic now, am I? Or understand the idea of the papacy, or understand the idea of the veneration of Mary, I'm not really a Catholic now, am I? If I don't understand those basic, very easy to understand terms. Like, there are a lot of Catholics out there who don't understand the idea of transmogrification. And I point you towards P.Z. Myers as evidence of this. He used to be a Catholic. He doesn't understand it. Yeah, he's basically took the new atheist tactic and used it against them, who were taking fundamentalist tactics and used it against them. It's all complete total circle fuck. And here's the thing I want to ask you, James. Don't you presuppose that what you know about the Bible, what you know about God, what you know about the world, whatever, is true?
The question you ask me is either worded very sloppily or is deceptive. I do not presuppose the Bible is true. I do not presuppose that God exists. I do presuppose that what I know about the Bible is true. I do presuppose what I know about God is true. This presupposition is based on real-world events, some science, and faith. My knowledge is inherently presupposed, as is everyone else's knowledge. However, my presupposed knowledge does not mean that I presuppose the Bible or presuppose God. I have looked for and found evidence for both of those things. In reference to presupposing knowing about the world, I don't know exactly what you mean about when you say that, so I can't really speak to it. I hope this clarifies what I know versus what I presuppose.
Okay, let me clarify. You presuppose what you've found out about the world is true, or the way that celestial mechanics, the way that physics, biology, zoology, chemistry says that the world works is the way that the world works. That somebody down the line isn't going to come around and say, well, the world doesn't really move in the way we think, it moves in a slightly different way, that, you presuppose that is true. I mean, because we always presuppose that is not going to change. And it may do so. Again, I'm not saying it no, because that's the way science works. But we need to have a look at facts, and you're saying that you base it upon facts. Well, that is presupposition. It's called evidentiary presuppositionalism. You're taking what you know from science or whatever, what books that you've read, even if it's on the Bible, and saying that their argument is valid and correct. And you're presupposing that their interpretation of the facts and the evidence available to them is more true than somebody who is saying that isn't the case, like something like, I don't know, Bat Ehrman or something like that. Somebody who's presenting the opposite case, or Israel Finkelstein, for example. As I said, people are presupposing that the Bible is the word of God or whatever, based upon what they've read about it, based upon whatever textual criticism they've read or whatever, because they think that is more they're presupposing that the person who's writing that is more correct than the person who's saying that isn't the case. That's what I'm saying, is that we presuppose that we tend to do. I mean, I tend to read both sides, but again, I can't speak that my presuppositions don't back up that I tend to favour the more positive side, because that's just the way that I'm hardwired. Because of the two, I think that the positive makes a better argument, evidentiary, than the negative. So it's evidentiary presupposition in that from my own subjective judgment, I think the positives make a better argument than the negatives. Somebody who's on the negative side could say the opposite, and that's a presuppositional opinion as well. Because we're both presupposing that the person that we're reading is correct, where either one may be incorrect. Even both sides may be incorrect at this point in time. And that's basically the point I'm trying to get across, is that we have to presuppose that the thing we're reading is correct, and that the information they're relaying to us is correct. Otherwise, we're following a fool's errand, basically. How is that not a presupposition? You presuppose a lot of things. You presuppose that Jesus was just and everything he said was correct and right. He could have been the opposite side. He could have been a villain going against the kind Pharisees who do nothing but trying to maintain honour.
Which is why I have never presupposed that Jesus was just or a good person. And Gary, neither have you. There was a time that you had never heard of Jesus Christ, that you had to look at evidence, and based on that evidence came to a conclusion that he was a good person. Now you presuppose the evidence that you see is accurate and correct, but you didn't start out presupposing that Jesus was the best thing on earth. You had to come to that conclusion based on whatever evidence you came to. So that is not a presupposition that I believe Jesus Christ is a good person just because Jesus Christ is a good person. Even if someone said Jesus Christ is a good person because the Bible told them so, they did not presuppose that Jesus Christ was a good person just because Jesus Christ is a good person. They based it on the evidence of...
And that is the point, is that we are presupposing that what we're reading, or the way we interpret the Bible, or the way we're interpreting people's interpretation of the Bible is correct. So we're presupposing that what we're reading is a correct version of what happened in history. As I said, the way I said is that is possible because there are people out there who say that everything about Jesus was written to favour the idea that he was this messianic figure. I think they're wrong, but again, that's my personal opinion. That's my presupposition that they're incorrect about that assertion. Now, we only have the Gospels accounts and Paul's accounts of Jesus and what he was like. What they could be incorrect for all we know. He could have been an evil bastard for all we know. We don't know that. Now, I think that the Gospels are a true depiction of the person we would call Jesus. But there are people out there who would disagree with that. And I can't say for 100% fact that they're wrong, but I think they are. And that's a presupposition. Based upon what I think, what I've read, what I know, and that's called evidential presuppositionalism. I don't know it for a fact, based upon what I've read and what I think. I just don't think that's the case. They would probably say, well, based upon the things I've read, that's what I presuppose to be true. We both don't know it, but we're thinking that the evidence that we've read tends to point that way. That's all I'm saying.
The Bible.
These are all things that we presuppose, and everyone presupposes something. Again, the thing is, James, is that we have to understand that presuppositional apologetics is not a bad argument. It's just that sometimes people who are bad arguers use it. Anyway, this is Phoneybeetlemaniac, forgeries, welcome true out.
Gary, I just spent an hour to an hour and a half utilizing editing software for both audio and visual effects so that you could agree with me within the last 30 seconds and basically make my point that presupposition is not an argument. You, sir, are either the best troll on the face of the planet or the best arguer on the face of the planet. Either way, I salute you. Have a good night.
I was making the point there are people who don't understand an argument who use it and therefore turn people off to actually discussing it with people who actually do understand it. That's my point. Is that if that presupposition may be a horrible argument, I'll concede that. It may be so. But the difference between, let's say, for example, someone like Saitan using it and someone like me using it. I understand it. I've read on the damn subjects. He hasn't. Again, I know this by the way he acts, because it's totally contrary to the way St. Anselm acted, or anyone else who has, used this argument has. It's that level of, people tend to judge the argument by the person presenting it and not by the argument itself. Because again, if people actually looked up people who are actually legitimate presuppositionalists, they wouldn't take Saitan Brunegate that seriously at all, because they know that he doesn't represent the argument. It'd be like me saying, well, the best people to argue for atheism is someone like Dawkins. A lot of atheists out there would probably disagree with that, because they know that Dawkins, when it comes to theology, is basically illiterate on the subject. And, the ones who are really honest about that will call him out for that, like people like Daniel Kind have done so. And that's what I do. I call out Saitan Brunegate for being the dishonest prick he is. I don't feel bad or any way disinvolved for doing so. If someone makes a bad argument, they make a bad argument. I don't feel bad about putting the boot to them when they've said something stupid. What I do mind is being looked in there when I happen to agree with a certain part of the argument. I'm an evidentiary presuppositionalist. I don't feel ashamed. I don't feel any way bad about being so. And I think, and the reason that I get uppity about Saitan Brunegate is that I'm getting lumped in with it. Whenever I hear, presuppositionalism is stupid, I feel that person is stupid. If you can't be bothered to look at what the actual argument is, then what's the point in us having a conversation? A conversation is a dialogue. It isn't about you just telling me I'm stupid or me telling you you're stupid or irrational or delusional or whatever for using an argument I disagree with. An actual dialogue, James, is about two people discussing things like rational human beings, and that's what we're doing here. And this is what the presuppositional apologetics and argument should be about. It shouldn't just be, presuppositionalism is this, therefore anyone who uses it is this. That isn't how dialogue or academia or debating goes. It goes by being actual intellectuals and trying to be rational about this. So, as I said before, please look at what actual presuppositionalism is, because again, while the dictionary term is accurate, it isn't what the nuance of the opinion is. And as I said, I don't mind being called a presuppositionalist. It's actually a term I actually love, because when I was looking up theology, it's one of the terms I actually gravitated towards, because it best explained what my mind was at the time. I just have a problem with people telling me I'm dishonest for doing so. And that's where I have a problem being associated with Sir Tim Bernagate. He's dishonest, I'm not. I tried to look up this stuff, he hasn't. And the thing is that most people in the world are presuppositionalists in one way or the other. Is that I'm most honest about it. It's Phoneybeetlemaniac saying, dreams may come true, out.